Now, I want to talk about Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Since the entire rap beef started, and ended, it's long ended by the way, I was always puzzled as to what was the origin of their beef. Here you got two guys, you got two rappers who are like at the top of their game, both coming against one another, but what's the origin story? And I think I have the answer. I'm going to get right to the point. Unless something happened on the tour, and if you haven't been hiding under a rock, Drake took Kendrick Lamar on his first tour, you know what I mean, so to speak. Kendrick Lamar used to open up for Drake, unless something happened on that tour, there is no origin story. As strange as it may sound, there is no origin story. Simply put, Kendrick Lamar just don't like Drake. He never have, he never did. The same way DMX gave an interview, I believe, with the Breakfast Club. DMX hated Drake. What was the reason? There was no particular reason. We go through this thing in life, apples and oranges. Sometimes things are the opposite. You got fruits, you got vegetables. Sometimes you meet people you like, you vibe with, and then other times you don't. But given the nature of the discussion that we have, and we have to take into consideration that at the end of the day, this is hip hop. Hip hop is competitive by nature. Hip hop started off with the break dance and the dance battles, the rap battles, the DJ battles. You know what I mean? It also started off by different MCs speaking out against social injustices. We got to keep that into consideration. But hip hop has always been, competitive. Look at the Sugar Hill Gang. You got a bunch of guys on stage, yeah, they rocking the mic, but at the same time, they trying to see who can out rap each other. I remember years ago, my homeboy, I had a group of artists that I work with, and we would all work together on different songs, but everybody was trying to out rap each other. You know what I mean? This person wanted to rap on this part of the beat because there's a beat drop that comes in, and he'll be able to get his shine on. You know what I mean? Everybody was trying to out rap each other, and that's just every rapper that we met, every rapper I've ever met in my life. I'd be chilling, 3 or 4 guys, we all chilling, blazing up. We get to freestyling, everybody trying to out rap each other. I know somebody, they end up going to they a rapper, and they end up going to a New Year's Eve party. They met another rapper, and they get the freestyle battling right then and there, trying to out rap each other. You know what I mean? Like hip hop, that's hip hop. It's competitive. It's not like Kuriko's Vision, right? When you look at the TV show, the anime Kuriko Vision, it's an anime about basketball. And here's the concept of the TV show. Kuriko, right? He was trying to get the 5 basketball players, because it was 6 of them. They was all on the same team. But he was trying to get them to work together and let's stay together like we brothers, we family, you know what I mean? We build something. But he the 6th man. He trying to keep them all together. But the other basketball players, they realize, I can't grow stronger. I can't focus on my personal growth, my personal strength, unless I focus on me and get away from the team. So the team ended up splitting up, playing on different basketball teams, and now they all battling each other, trying to see like who's the best baller. While Kuriko, he's stuck on this whole, oh, let's get along, let's all hold hands, kumbaya, bullshit. Oh, kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. Let's hold hands, everybody. But in the real world, especially when it comes to something like hip hop, it don't work that way, and I had to learn that the hard way. I really did have to learn that the hard way. When it comes to hip hop, you got to get out there. You got to do it on your own. You got to get out there and get it. You got to focus on your own individual strength. You can't sit up here and depend on nobody. And I think that's what happened with Kendrick. He realized early on, if he really wanted to be the top guy, he wanted to be the number one guy in hip hop, he couldn't be friends with Drake, and he had to get away from him, and he got to try to outshine him, and you know what I mean? And stomp on him, so to speak. But after they end up going on tour, I think they did one song together. I think Kendrick Lamar said some stuff during the interview. Maybe Drake said some stuff during the interview. Kendrick Lamar came out with the control verse. Drake had an interview, they end up talking on the phone or something like that afterwards, then a bunch of sneak battles started happening, right? Sneak disses, which is a common thing in hip hop. They got the guns and they got them aimed at somebody. We the listener, we're not gonna know who it's for, but unless you like an elite level rapper, you know who the bars are for. You know what I mean? So they doing a bunch of sneak dissing, and let's talk about XXXTentacion. XXXTentacion enters the picture. I want to say 2016, 2017. Him and Drake, they're going at it. He's accusing Drake of stealing his flow from "Look at Me." You know what I mean? And rightfully so, because if you do a comparison, you can almost match them up with each other, like by the cadence, word by word. Like the cadence, the rhyme scheme is just alike, So he had every right to be upset about that. But also at the same time, Kendrick Lamar, I believe, brought him on his tour. Like either his tour or at one of his shows, XXXTentacion, you opening up for one of the biggest artists in the world. Spotify during that time had threatened to remove XXXTentacion music from Spotify because it was so controversial. Like his lyrics were so controversial. Spotify had threatened to remove it, take it completely down. So what does Kendrick Lamar do? He comes out in support of XXXTentacion. He says, hey, check it out. If you take his music down, you gotta take mine down too. If you take his music down, you gotta take mine down too. And he supported XXXTentacion heavily. He's one of the very few artists that do that, and Spotify, they backed down. They said, okay, you know what I mean? We're gonna leave it up. It is what it is. XXXTentacion later goes on to throw up a post that says, if anybody comes to off me or hurt me, it was at Champagne Poppy, because he still has his feud with Drake going on. And they doing a bunch of, like they got a really big feud. And I believe XXXTentacion, he did the Helping Hands challenge. And then I think Drake, he ended up doing the same thing that X did just to spite him. But let's keep this in mind. How close was XXXTentacion with Kendrick Lamar? If I ever got a chance to meet Kendrick or do an interview, that would be one of the main questions I would ask him. How close were you with XXX Obviously, from the evidence that's put out there, from everything that's out there in the public, there was some kind of relationship. There was some kind of relationship. They had some type of bonding. There was some kind of friendship. The friendship was there from everything we see online. If we look at the evidence, we could see the relationship. We could see the friendship. It's there. How close did you all bond? Did you all talk to each other on a weekly basis? What was the conversation like? What was the personality like? Like, I hate when people, they get these interviews with very big artists and they refuse to ask them important questions. So obviously the relationship was there, the bonding was there, something was there. How big of a presence was it? We don't know. We, the audience, we don't know that. We don't know everything the magician does behind the scene, unfortunately. But flash forward, XXXTentacion unfortunately loses his life, which is very unfortunate. So what does this have to all tie in and do with the Kendrick Lamar, Drake? We're going to get to that right now. What song was that? After XXXTentacion passes away, right? A lot of conspiracy theories ended up surfacing online about Drake having something to do with the death of XXXTentacion. Now, I'm going to go on record and say, there is no evidence that points to Drake having anything to do with that. There is no evidence whatsoever. I don't want to get in any legal trouble or nothing like that. This is all entertainment purposes only. But there is no evidence that ties Drake to the death of XXXTentacion. With that being said, after his passing, Drake, what does he decide to do? You got all these conspiracy theories going on. He decides to play into it. Let's get this song right here. He could have easily stopped, blah, 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 very light hook. He's, what is that song? He says right here, these lyrics right here, end up getting loose and getting pictures from my ex, XXXX, SMS, triple X. That's the only time I'll ever shoot below the neck. Why you keep shooting if you know that nigga dead? That's the only kind of shit that gets you some respect. He said those lyrics in one of his songs, He said those lyrics. And a lot of XXX fans, including myself, was in an uproar. People were upset. I was upset. I was like, yo, how he gonna diss the homie Triple X like that? You know what I mean? A lot of fans were upset. Like, and this is clearly a sneak diss. Like there's no other way to put it. It was a diss. XXXTentacion, he already passed away. He's dead and he's gone. And then you come out and you say, again, quote unquote, end up getting loose and getting pictures from my ex, SMS, triple X. That's the only time I ever shoot below the neck. And if you know what happened, where did XXXTentacion get shot? It was below the neck. Why you keep shooting if you know that nigga dead? That's the only kind of that gets you some respect. And then he had another one, what was that, God's Plan. Louis bags in exchange for some body bags. Louis bags in exchange for some body bags. You know what did XXX and Tentacion get robbed of? Louis bag. So here you have Drake lyrically playing into these conspiracies. You know what I mean? Almost mocking XXX Tentacion fans. You know, and that, you know, I have no evidence of none of this, but that is what I believe was the catalyst for Kendrick Lamar. That was the, you know, that was the red button for Kendrick Lamar. Again, we don't know how close Kendrick was to XXX and Tentacion. After the battle, guess what? XXX Tentacion, after the Drake and Kendrick battle, came out and thanked Kendrick Lamar for supporting his son. Keep that in mind. And that he made a public statement. Again, also keep in mind that we, the fans, we don't know how close they were. Kendrick Lamar and XXX Tentacion, they could have been boys. They could have been talking to each other on a weekly basis. You know, Kendrick Lamar could have been like a big brother to X. You know, Kendrick Lamar, maybe he had plans, you know, to bring X under his wings. Maybe they were talking like off to the side. We the fans, we don't know. Just like we didn't find out until recently that Kendrick and Drake, they talked before the battle. This is public knowledge now. Kendrick Lamar and Drake had a conversation before the battle. What were the contents of that conversation? We don't know. We don't know. But I do know that Drake was saying some wild things. Maybe they say, from what I've heard, this is from what I heard, they say Drake was talking to him like he was a mob boss. You know, some things were said and he was talking to him like he was a mob boss. They was like, yo, he came all type of sideways, you know what I mean? He came, you know, he was saying whoop-de-whoop. He was talking like a mob boss. You know, that's what I heard. Again, we don't know. So going back to the Triple X situation, we don't know how close Kendrick and X were, but based upon evidence, there was a friendship there. So theoretically speaking, if you Kendrick Lamar, you already don't like this guy. You know, you hurt, you upset, your homeboy, he got killed, somebody that you knew, you know, a colleague, a brethren, somebody that you knew, they had something unfortunate happen to him. And now you got this guy who you already don't like coming out making sidebars or side disses. You know, he coming at your boy. You know what I mean? Oh, he dissing him. He said, what? You know, in Chicago, you know, dissing dead people or people who's been deceased, those come with serious consequences, you know. It could be the same way in New York, North Carolina, no matter where you go, you know. You talk about someone, deceased loved one, or maybe their deceased friend or family member, that comes with serious consequences, you know. And that's why I think Kendrick, you said to himself, and I do believe he said to himself, it was time for him to push the red button. You know, it's time to, like, even when you look at the Supertime halftime show, you know, a lot of his live performances, you know, he's paying a big homage. He's honoring like X. You know what I mean? In the Super Bowl halftime show, he's standing in the middle of an X. You know what I mean? So that's why I think was the catalyst. That was it. I think Kendrick Lamar said to himself, yo, it's time for me to lyrically take him down. You know, but other than that, the origin, talking about the true origin, how did the beef start? There is no origin. You got two guys, you know, playing basketball. And in order for me to better myself, you know, you the competition. You the competition. I can't better myself, being around you. I got to get away from you. We can't work together. It's almost like a UFC fighter. Y'all playing the sport, but hey, I want the championship belt. And I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get a championship belt. That is what hip hop is. It's not like Kirk Cole's vision. You know what I mean? Well, let's all work together as a team. Let's build up a team of artists and let's do this as a group. No, it don't work that way in hip hop. This is the real world. Hey, if you want the ring, if you want the championship belt, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to get to the top. It's nothing personal. Even if you gotta stomp on a couple of, people to get there. That's what Kendrick Lamar whole riff was, and rightfully so. As a hip hop head myself, I can't sit up here and say, "Oh, Kendrick is wrong," because Drake, he did try to piece it up with Kendrick 4 or 5 times while they were sending sneak disses at each other. We got to give credit to where credit is due. Drake he got on stage. Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Kendrick Lamar, trying to piece it up. Kendrick Lamar, boom, come right back, firing at him. Rightfully so. Rightfully so. Hey, here you got a guy right here who's hungry, who wants that number one spot at the top. Either hip hop is a competitive sport or it's not. This your homeboy, Underground Perspective, checking in, checking out.